I believe that it is very important for us that the Russian was promised to hand over the doable document. It is not doable. According to the law. Not only my political will. This is very important so that no one later says that Zelensky is difficult to negotiate. I'm not simple, but there is legislation. Legislation cannot be moved back and forth in some way. This is not about advocacy, someone, or something. This is not a debate. There is specific legislation, international, and there is a constitution. Therefore, there is what is. There is a legislative foundation. And that's why it's important that we all be consistent. I support the consistency proposed by the American side. Ceasefire or sanctions. We didn't want sanctions against us. We support the ceasefire. The Russians probably do not care. Then we ask you to apply sanctions. Your second story was, sorry.
Ceasefire, which you propose to be with American monitoring and mediation guarantees.
In any case, after the parties come to a ceasefire, everyone is interested in who will be the guarantor. Who will be the one to carry out that mediation mission? The mission is to say that this side has violated, or this one. Appropriate sanctions for ceasefire violations. We said from the very beginning and at the meetings in Istanbul 1 and Istanbul 2 that America can guarantee this monitoring. The fact that they involve European partners or do not involve them is already a technical issue for America. I think they will agree. They understand that technically only they can fully perform this function. And this gives an understanding of why leaders should meet in this format. I think so. That is, I believe that it is necessary to demonstrate the will to ceasefire. And this is not a bad idea for a ceasefire until the meeting. At the meeting, we talk about the monitoring format. Because there are some things that are technically monitored independently of one side or the other. If we negotiate a ceasefire, it is understandably easy to control the range of both sides. Of course, it is very easy to control that missiles do not fly, long-range drones do not fly, and that there are no ships at sea and there are no attacks on port infrastructures, etc. That is, it is very easy to control technically. It is more difficult to control events at the front. So, for events at the front, mediation is technically still required. Mediation for justice. In order for both parties not to accuse one or the other party of violations. Understand? Technologically, thanks to drones, we can control all this at the front. But we will say what the Russians are violating, the Russians will say what the Ukrainians are violating. For this, a third party, an intermediary, is taken. That's what it is for. But it is possible to demonstrate the will to end the war to the leaders. This can be done. And here the Russians will not be able to argue because they did it. Twice. One-sided, although the assaults continued. But such a unilateral proposal was made. And they did not say that this is impossible without the Americans. And that's why I said that I think it is necessary to first understand that they are ready to end the war. That they have such a will and desire. Therefore, my proposal now is a ceasefire until our meeting at the level of leaders. Without any conditions. Because we say, okay, when, tomorrow? Let's go tomorrow. Istanbul, Switzerland, Vatican, day after tomorrow, after, from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. Please. We are open. But at this time, people will understand that the peoples, Europe, Ukraine, and the whole world have a chance to end the war. Do you see? We demonstrated. The parties even demonstrated a temporary cessation of the war before the leaders' meeting. That is why there is such a proposal. This could not have been done if people in Istanbul had been constructive. They are not constructive.
Suspiln. Andriy Stasiuk, Suspiln. I wanted to clarify about the memorandum. Are there any points that Ukraine can consider as working? And you also said that if we had received this memorandum earlier, we might not have gone to this meeting at all. We have obtained.
No, not like this. They understood that the Ukrainian side said, what are we going to discuss? These points, that is, are an ultimatum and not a proposal for de-escalation.
That is, now my question is, if there are meetings at the level of the same delegations such as there are now, does this mean that Istanbul 3 may not take place? Do you plan that it will happen?
I said, as I believe, if we want to be subjects and have a result, I believe in what format we should continue. Ultimatums won't work. The question is not in the clauses of this agreement. I didn't just give you isolated clauses, I explained things to you step by step. But I can continue to speak until the end. The question is not this or that point that can be fulfilled or not, but that the spirit of this document is an ultimatum. It is necessary to change the spirit of the document. And then other approaches to certain issues will be changed. About people, about territories, about de-escalation, about ceasefire. That is, if you don't want to, you write like this. Or if you want to please a radical, very radical part of your society, I'm talking about Russians now, if you want to please them very much, then write such a document, then post it through TASS, through whom they threw it on the internet. And frankly, I'm not sure that even this will satisfy their radical people who want to completely destroy you and me with nuclear weapons and then destroy all of Europe. They talk openly about it. Have you heard this team talk about children? Yes? I don't even want to quote them about European women. Okay, about children is their position. About other points, about territories, this is their position. About Ukraine as a whole, their position. We will go further, all the way to Berlin. Look, it's even sad. It's sad to watch this.
The second short question is about the commander of the ground forces. Have you decided on your candidacy?
Not decided.
Thanks. The New York Times, please. I want to find out. You are proposing a ceasefire until the leaders meet. Can there be a meeting of the leaders without a ceasefire? And very briefly, because you have already said, what makes you think that the meeting of leaders will change something significantly?
My opinion, if we will have a ceasefire,
My opinion, if we have a ceasefire, a short one, before the meeting of the leaders, it seems to me that this is the mood, the spirit of the meeting. We are talking here for peace, or we are working with war again. This is a matter of de-escalation possible. The second point, if the leaders of the states come and have meetings, and everyone is still expressing themselves, it seems to me that there will be some success for their respective nations assured. Small success, greater success, but it will be another stage in our progress towards peace. If we say that it is a long or short period of ceasefire, but the document that arises at the end is good, satisfactory, this is not our dream, not what we dream about every day, but it is a very decisive measure that leads to peace. The second point, if we are talking about humanitarian issues, children. How to get thousands of children back. It's not a day, not a week, not a month. I don't know how long it takes. And this is very sad. But they can grow up. Some children will become adults. I want to emphasize this. We can start this discussion, find some mechanism to bring our children home. We must do everything we can. It seems to me that if there is a political resolution on a ceasefire at the level of leaders to prepare a document, that will lead us to the end of this war. Then children, the exchange of all for all. Let's say all for all. This is the last chance. No one else will rule that I need advice. Here are the heads of state, here are the top officials. And we can achieve a certain success, comprehend this goal, a certain goal. If the United States has a strong position, if Russia is ready to take any measures for peace, they are not ready, it seems to me. But I talked about it. I was in September with President Trump. He was not yet president then, he was not elected. But I said that personally Putin does not want any peace. But only ultimatums and only the complete occupation of Ukrainian, Belarusian, Moldovan, Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian, Kazakh territory. It seems to me that Kazakhstan may be closer in line, God forbid, of course, but we are talking about threat options. And he is acting in this direction. And also Poland. I spoke with the new Romanian president. I said what the occupation of Ukraine is. Everyone understands that this is the occupation of Moldova. Immediately, they find themselves on the border with Romania. Immediately. It will be very fast. During. So, that's what he desires. And we do not need to wait for Putin personally, we do not need to wait for the time when he will be ready for peace. We cannot wait for his initiation into peace, his will. We need to put pressure, and maybe then there will be peace. We will gain. We have come close to this, with sanctions, etc. We need unity, a common position.
So, can there be a meeting of leaders without a ceasefire? Without a ceasefire, can there be a meeting of leaders?
Maybe. Yes, it can. Again, I don't want to be too flexible with the ceasefire. Because this is an opportunity, a great opportunity to provide. Between us, it's not a secret to President Trump about the ceasefire. This is the end of the war. But this is a big progress towards the end of the war with the Russians. I think so. But even if there is no ceasefire, if the question is, directly, whether we are ready for a meeting at the level of heads of state without a ceasefire, that is, before ceasefire, if I say no, this will mean that the Russians will immediately say, they don't want to. I don't want to play their games. So that we don't have to later disavow any statements. We say that we are ready at the level of heads of state. Ready. But my personal position is as follows. That would still be better. If such a meeting had been preceded by a ceasefire, this is a clear movement towards peace. The reason for the meeting and then the ceasefire to support de-escalation or not to support it.
Christina Gavrish, ICTV channel. Mr. President, we have not seen such a public reaction of US President Donald Trump to our spider web operation. Perhaps they were non-public. You will tell us. At the same time, there was Keith Kellogg's reaction to it. He said that Ukraine seems to increase the level of risks in this war in this way. Please comment on this.
It is difficult for me to comment for President Trump. I think we didn't hear him. We heard several people around him. Probably this is their common opinion. I think so. I don't know, honestly, I don't know. But you know, like with the United States, we can still hear. We know in general that we are absolutely fair. We did not shoot at civilian infrastructure, at children, what the Russians are doing. We didn't do any of that. Okay. And we did absolutely fair things. And we did it at such a level that the intelligence of all countries, believe me, all very serious countries, said, this is the highest level of preparation and special operations.
With your permission, one more question. In the Sumy region, there is such an intensive movement of Russians there. How hard do they really press?
They will do it all the time. There is nothing new for us here. There are no surprises here. The military knows what to do and is doing everything they can. Honestly, that is, the Russians, this was their history. I told you this honestly. Which of the directions will they choose the main one? It was more than a year ago when we started the Kursk direction. We thought anyway they would start with Sumy. But we had an understanding that the east, Zaporizhzhia, Kharkiv. But still everything returned to Sumy. That is, it was their idea. This is not a new operation. This is just another wave of offensive. They will do it. And they have no success there in Sumy. Believe me, what is happening there, unfortunately, there is a grey area. Some, you know, villages were destroyed. It's not like they did it all in one day, it's quite a lengthy process. They are doing it. The Russians are doing this, Ukrainian troops know it and are fighting it. They would go in a faster wave and want to, because this is their operation. Occupation of Sumy and Kharkiv regions. That is, this is their desire. As we said, at first they had a desire, this whole line. Then they decided that there would be enough to control and destroy Sumy and other important cities. 30 to 40 kilometers from the border will be enough. Then they reduced it to 7 to 10 kilometers because they understand that they do not have enough strength. Believe me, there are no good reasons there. They just don't have enough strength. If it was enough, they would go further. And this is their content. And therefore, they postpone all these measures so that there are no sanctions and there are no decisions. It seems like diplomacy. You see, everything is fine. And you know, it's possible to talk the real peace to death. They are truly talking the end of the war to death in a way that plays well in the press and media. That is, they will talk to death to some companies, to other channels. They will take former anchors of CNN, Fox, and others. Both. I don't mean Republican or Democratic media. No, all. They take X1's search, work. There are contracts. We see their movement, what they do. They are blinding us with smoke and dodging the topic. And we are doing everything to prevent this from happening. Their main narrative is as follows. That is, to show that Ukraine does not want peace, Ukraine will lose the war. Everything must be done so that America withdraws from the negotiations, so that America does not impose sanctions then. That is, these are their main principles. To be alone with us, without the help of everyone, so that there would be an ultimatum later. Something like that.
CNN, please.
Good afternoon, Victoria Vitenko, CNN. Mr. President, do you feel the political will of the United States to continue to mediate the negotiations? And how much political will is there in Russia to allow the United States to conduct a mediation function?
For example, in Turkey, the demonstration of American mediation was absolutely clear. The Russians did everything to throw them out of the negotiating platform. Which they did. They did it once. Everyone was surprised. Yes, absolutely. Because, somehow it happened, ugly. It seems that we were gathered in Istanbul, to be honest, by the Americans. And the agenda was very difficult because we wanted specifics. And we agreed that the Americans will find some generalized approach. Then we were all surprised because the Americans were thrown out, the Russians threw them out. They immediately went on the offensive to the corresponding ultimatums. That is, it is a prepared story. To be honest, they are not very happy with Turkish mediation. Why? How did it happen? Through Turkish mediation, our first meeting in Istanbul was, they threw out the Americans. And therefore, I believe that now there was no strong representation of America at Istanbul too. If you compare who was from America that time and who represented now, nobody. It's true. That is, then everyone was more constructive. And then we saw what the Russians were doing. Further, Turkey gave the floor to the Russian side in the first Istanbul. This is important to know. Why? I have no complaints against the Turkish side. But it is important to know in order to understand how it happened. And the Russians began a long historical reminiscence, a digression all the way to Peter I. Well, in their own style. Taking time to say later, we negotiated and here you have an exchange. Okay, everyone has experienced this. Second time. The Turkish side rightly gave the floor to us, the first. And we moved on to specifics to the agenda. The Russians then returned everyone back to the historical digression. But what is important to know? That the Russians, according to our information, are very dissatisfied with Turkey's behavior. Very dissatisfied. You see, kings and gods.
Colleagues, we have been talking for almost an hour and we will conclude soon. 2 more questions. Yours, please. And there is Bloomberg on the other side.
Katerina Denisova, Kiev Independent. Mr. President, at what stage are negotiations with the United States on a potential agreement on the purchase of American weapons? What do you see in this deal? How can this mechanism work? Thanks.
The agenda of the meeting of the Ukrainian team with the American side yesterday, is as follows. The first one, where we are with the mineral deal. And we really understand from our side. that this is a positive on the American side. And there will be a meeting today with Deputy Prime Minister Sviridенko. I think with Bezant today. A meeting on the deal, on our proposals. On the free trade agreement between Ukraine and the United States. We offer. She will present everything. She will also present on the mineral deal today in the Senate, and she will also present it to Bezant where we are at this point and on the free trade agreement. The second point of this agenda, not the second point, that is, two agreements, it is the first point on free trade and defense agreement. There we have the first deputy, Boev, as I said, the first deputy of the Minister of Defense, as well as the deputy Pavlo Palisa. The two of them will present relevant questions about the agreement that we have proposed, which I am discussing with the Europeans on the financing potential of this agreement. Because it is serious. And therefore, I will know the status after the meeting. Honestly. These are 2 points. The third point is important, sanctions. Because Vlasic shows which sanctions work, which do not work, demonstrates it to senators and demonstrates what exactly we really want and ask for. And what impact can their proposal have? And it was precisely because of us that there was such a link, and it's important. And we are now demonstrating it to senators. Lindsay's connection as a representative of the Senate and this sanctions package with Ursula and European leaders. This is important. Such a coherent large package on both sides. This is the agenda of the meeting. Okay. It seems to me that this is the main point. My suggestion was as follows. We have underutilized money. We have it. Which were voted. Nothing new is needed. Which were voted by Congress. Last year. We would like to use them. But at the same time, we show that we can use them. Or a separate strong deal, defensive deal, and some extra money. Because President Trump, he likes deals. For us, it can be win-win. An important deal. The weapons we need are important there. The main questions are all written out. What a weapon? In what quantity? To be honest, I don't see any serious challenges here. Because it is in this agreement that we want to take the weapons that, for example, representatives of the Middle East at one time or another bought in such and larger volumes bought American weapons. Therefore, I do not see that we are asking for something incomprehensible, fantastic. It depends on President Trump.
Bloomberg, please. Last question.
Thanks. Safronova Olesya, Bloomberg. Actually, I have a small clarification. If we go back to the question that you are proposing a meeting of leaders even without a ceasefire, how long are you willing to wait for Russian signals that they are preparing this meeting? Do you have any deadline? Is it weeks, or months, or how much? And what deadlines do you set for yourself and your team so that President Trump, even if the Senate passes a sanctions bill, still signs it? After all, signs this bill and did not look for any additional stories to postpone it?
How I look at it. I believe that if there is no position on a ceasefire, sanctions should be imposed. In general, I believe that sanctions should be imposed if Russia does not want to end the war. But again, the American side says, well, wait, this is a lot, we need to find a compromise. And that's how they put it. And we, no matter how we feel about this, think, okay, if the compromise is that if there is no ceasefire, then sanctions are imposed, then it is clear that I am answering your colleague's question, are we ready to meet at the level of leaders without a ceasefire? I will say yes, but if there is no ceasefire, then there should be sanctions. And then, I think, the result of the positive of this meeting decreases. Therefore, my proposal was that it seems to me that the Russians can demonstrate, which means to go to a ceasefire before the leaders' meeting, that is, we do not know how long it will be, it depends on them. This provides a window for, potentially, more reasons for delaying sanctions. I help, you see, all parties as much as I can. Then there's some logic, you know. Because if they do not agree to a ceasefire and sanctions are not imposed, there is no logic. And so I find in my head some kind of format for everyone to somehow
And how much longer are you so ready to look for the format?
I'm willing to think a lot. What can we do with you? We are preparing. A ceasefire could be before the operation we did, right? Correct. Would there have been operation then? No. This doesn't mean that while we want a ceasefire, it doesn't mean that we're doing nothing in parallel. Okay, this is our approach. Yes. Well, a ceasefire is a ceasefire. How could it be? We do not evaluate with you, to be honest, what you and I like or not. We must choose the rules. Right? I believe that if the ceasefire rules are for everyone, then they are for everyone. If they are violated, this is another matter. If they are violated, then we can also violate. And in what way do we violate, or do they? It depends on the parties. We don't necessarily have to tell what we're going to do tomorrow, after.
We don't violate anything?
We do not violate anything. You don't understand, then.
Thank you, colleagues.